It had been 6 weeks since I noticed the first shift. 6 weeks since the nanny cam tucked into the corner of the living room caught something that didn't match the words spoken in my own home. 6 weeks since I began pretending I didn't see what was right in front of me. And it had been 6 seconds, just 6, since I stepped into my own anniversary party and saw my best friend, Lila, standing close enough to my husband to cast one shadow. The room hummed with soft jazz, dim golden lights reflecting off the brass key I kept on my bracelet, the one symbolic thing I refused to take off. It swung against my wrist as I set down the cake knife, my eyes fixed on the two of them. They separated quickly when they noticed me, which told me everything. I hadn't planned to use the footage that night. But standing there, in the glow of our 10-year milestone at the Oak Ridge Garden Hall, I felt the moment tightening around me like a wire. I could already feel the shape of the truth pressing forward, too loud now to ignore. 2 hours earlier, while I was adjusting the champagne glasses, my phone buzzed with a message from our nanny, Carla. A short line, the camera recorded again today at 4:17. You may want to check. That timestamp, 4:17 p.m., etched itself into my mind, because it was the same moment my husband, Mark, had told me he was stuck in traffic. In that instant, I understood. He hadn't been stuck. He had been with someone. And the person he thought I'd never suspect was standing 10 feet from me, wearing a silver dress that caught every bit of light. I kept my expression level as a server brushed past. The backfill of the last months flickered in my head, Lila arriving uninvited for coffee, lingering too long, speaking too softly, Mark defending her in ways that didn't match the situation, the two of them exchanging glances they thought were quick. Individually nothing. Together everything. And the assumption beneath it all, that I would stay blind because I valued peace too much to confront betrayal. Now I returned to the scene as it unfolded. Guests were gathering near the long table, plates clinking lightly. My mother-in-law asked where the champagne flutes were. I handed her the tray without looking away from the two people who had reorganized my life without permission. Mark approached, brushing invisible dust off his suit jacket. "You good?" he asked, casual in a way meant to keep me predictable. "I'm perfect," I said. "Can you help me with something in the back room?" His brows lifted, just a flicker. Suspicion. Or guilt. Or both. But I wasn't ready for him yet. I turned instead to Lila. "Actually," I said, "I need you for a second." "Just you." Her smile faltered. "Why?" "Because it's our anniversary," I replied lightly, "and I want to give you something." She followed me toward the hallway, and I could practically hear her mind racing, rationalizing, adjusting, convincing herself that whatever I had seen, I must have misread. People like her believed they were masters of perception. Halfway down the corridor, she whispered, "Is everything okay? You seem off tonight." I stopped beside the coat rack, brushing my thumb over the brass key charm on my bracelet. "You'd tell me if something felt wrong between us, wouldn't you?" Her throat bobbed as she swallowed. "Of course. You know I would." The lie was soft. Padded. Practiced. My phone buzzed again, a quick text from Carla, "Camera saved the file." Same folder. I locked the screen and slipped it into my clutch, letting the weight of the moment settle. Before I could speak, a new microscene emerged, my sister, Emily, poking her head around the corner, whispering, "They're about to do the toast. Do you need me to stall?" I met her eyes. Not yet. Because the truth hadn't finished gathering itself. Not yet. But it was coming. I walked back into the banquet hall with my breath steady and my mind aligned. The betrayal was no longer a suspicion, it was a structure. And structures can be dismantled brick by brick. By the time we reached the midpoint of the party, I already knew, tonight wouldn't end the way they assumed. Tonight, I would begin turning the key. Mark clinked his fork against a champagne glass, calling for everyone's attention. The sound cut sharply through the hum of conversation, and the entire hall turned toward him. I stood at his side, hands folded neatly, the brass key on my bracelet catching a slice of light as if reminding me why I was there. He smiled, a polished, public smile, and reached for my hand. But before he could speak, Lila stepped closer than she should have. Close enough that a few guests exchanged looks. She touched his arm lightly, pretending it was innocent. It wasn't. I stayed still, watching the scene unfold. Because this was the moment where their assumptions would crystallize. I wanted to see it fully. 10 years, Mark began. And I've never loved anyone the way I love. He didn't get to finish. I can't hold it in anymore, Lila blurted. A ripple passed through the room, a collective inhale. She turned toward me, then toward Mark, then back again. Her voice trembled in that dramatic, trembling way meant to frame herself as a victim of her own emotions. I love him, she said. I've loved him for years. And I'm tired of pretending. The room froze. Forks stopped midair. Even the jazz track seemed to hesitate for half a second as an entire hall full of people tried to decide what they were witnessing. Mark's jaw dropped. Lila, what the hell are you doing? But she wasn't looking at him now. She was watching me. She expected me to crumble. To cry. To lash out. To be small. She had crafted this moment in her head 100 times, and in every version, I broke. Instead, I simply said, thank you. The silence thickened. Even Mark stared at me like I'd suddenly switched languages. A server passed, awkwardly setting down a tray of strawberry tarts, unsure if they were interrupting something sacred or dangerous. I lifted my glass, swirled it once, and placed it neatly on the table. Then I walked toward the sound booth at the back of the hall. Every step felt like tightening a set of gears, pulling the night toward its true trajectory. Where are you going? Mark called. To play something, I said. I reached the booth, handed the technician my phone, and whispered, volume moderate. When I nod. His eyes widened slightly when he saw the thumbnail of the video file. But he nodded. Before returning to the group, a memory surfaced, the backfill of the day everything changed. 2 months earlier, I came home early from a client meeting. I walked into the house quietly, letting myself enjoy the rare stillness of the afternoon. It was then I heard laughter, low, intimate, too comfortable. I followed it to the living room and saw the two of them sitting closer than friends sit. They weren't touching, but they didn't need to be. The air was charged. And I saw the way she looked at him, full of something she thought she deserved. I saw the way he didn't pull away. He let it happen. He didn't shut it down. I didn't confront them that day. I simply checked the nanny cam hidden inside the hollow of the bookshelf figurine. A small detail. Forgettable. But that little lens recorded everything that mattered later. Now, back in the present, I walked toward the center of the room again. The air felt thicker, anticipation coiling around every person watching. Lila, I said softly, you said you've loved my husband for years. Her chin lifted. I'm done hiding it. And you, I added, turning to Mark, told me you were stuck in traffic at 4:17 today. His eyes narrowed. What does that have to do with? I nodded at the technician. At first, just a soft click. Then a grainy video appeared on the projector screen behind us. Gasps scattered through the hall as the image sharpened. Timestamp, 4:17 p.m., today. The footage wasn't obscene. PG-13. But damning. Mark in our living room. Lila beside him. Her hand brushing his arm. His hand not moving away. Her leaning closer. Their conversation quiet but unmistakably intimate. Too intimate. Too familiar. Mark's face drained of color. That's not, this looks worse than, he turned to me. It wasn't what it looked like. Lila stepped back, horror flooding her face as she realized she'd forced her confession on the very night I had come prepared. You planned this, she whispered. No, I replied. You did. The guests murmured, whispers sweeping through the room like a tide. My mother-in-law pressed a hand to her chest. Someone dropped a glass. Two of Mark's cousins stared openly, unsure whether to leave or record the moment. Mark reached for my arm. "We should talk privately." "I don't think so." I stepped away, the brass key brushing my wrist, reminding me of the point of all this: boundaries, consent, integrity. And then the micro scene, my phone buzzed in my clutch. I glanced at the screen. A message from the nanny. "There's more footage from last week." Should I send the rest? Lila saw the notification. Her breath hitched. I locked the phone. "We'll talk," I said, my voice calm. "But not here. And not the way you expect." Because they had built their betrayal on an assumption that I was too gentle to collect proof. Too loyal to enforce consequences. Too scared to unlock the truth. They were about to learn how wrong they'd been. The room didn't return to normal, not even close. People drifted into little clusters, whispering as if the air itself might shatter if they spoke too loudly. I stood still, letting the silence shape itself around me. The brass key on my bracelet swung lightly, tapping my wrist like a metronome, keeping time with my thoughts. Mark reached for me again. "We're leaving. Now." He said it the way he always spoke when he wanted control, short, imperative, expecting compliance. Before all this, I might have followed him out to avoid creating a scene. Tonight, I let his hand close on empty air. "I'm not going anywhere," I replied calmly. He blinked, thrown. "What do you mean you're not going anywhere? This is our party." "Exactly," I said. A murmur rippled. My sister Emily stood near the dessert table, arms crossed, watching like she'd been waiting for this moment longer than I had. She mouthed, "You okay?" I nodded once. Mark's voice dropped. "Can we talk somewhere private?" "You had plenty of private time today at 4:17, I said. I spent that time telling guests where to hang their coats. A few guests tried to look away politely and failed. Eyes bounced between us like spectators at a match they hadn't paid for but didn't want to miss. Lila hovered near the edge of the circle we'd formed, pale, trembling, trying to figure out how to disappear without actually moving. Her silver dress shimmered under the lights, mocking her with every flicker. I turned toward her. "You said you've loved him for years. Why today? Why here? Why like this?" She swallowed. I couldn't hide it anymore." "That's interesting," I said. "Because you had no problem hiding everything else." She flinched. The technician cleared his throat. "Should I keep the screen on standby?" "Keep it ready," I replied. That triggered a new wave of panic in Lila. She stepped forward. "You don't need to humiliate us." A confession at my anniversary party wasn't meant to humiliate me? That was different. "No," I cut in. "It wasn't." The backfill rose again, the moment she crossed a line so quietly I almost missed it. 3 months earlier, she asked me if Mark and I were still doing okay, given the stress. When I said yes, she pressed further, asking if we still held the same schedules, the same date nights. I'd thought she was checking in as a friend. Then I saw her reaction, subtle, almost disappointed. As if she'd been hoping for a fracture. That was when the first seed of suspicion formed. A quiet one. But sometimes the quiet things decide everything. Returning to the present, Mark tried again. "We need to talk." "We will," I replied. "But not in the way you want." I walked toward the small lounge attached to the hall, and the crowd parted instinctively. Some followed at a polite distance, as if drawn by gravitational pull. Mark and Lila trailed behind me like two magnets that had just realized they repelled each other. Inside the lounge, the low lighting softened the edges of the moment. A leather sofa. A coffee table with unused coasters. A stack of venue brochures fanned out too neatly. I sat in one of the armchairs and gestured for them to take the other seats. Neither moved. "Sit," I said simply. They obeyed. For a few seconds, no one spoke. Not them, not me. Silence can be a tool if you use it long enough for someone else to fear what you're thinking. Finally, Mark said, nothing happened. Nothing physical. You have to believe that. You keep using the word physical as if that's the only standard for betrayal. His face tightened. Lila leaned forward. It wasn't an affair. It was emotions. Feelings. That's supposed to make it better? I asked. She shook her head. No. I'm saying it because it's the truth. Good. Then let's tell the full truth. I reached into my clutch and took out my phone. Lila stiffened instantly. Mark's eyes widened. You have more? He asked. I told you, I said quietly. I didn't plan to use anything tonight. But you didn't give me much of a choice. I opened the Nanny cam folder. There were dozens of files, each with a timestamp. I scrolled slowly, deliberately, letting them see how many there were. Why did you install that? Mark asked, voice breaking slightly. I didn't install it, I said. It's been there since the remodel. You were the one who insisted on extra cameras when we hired Carla after our move. His expression collapsed. He remembered. And realizing that his own precaution had become his undoing was its own kind of justice. I selected just one clip, short, quiet, but unmistakable. Last week. A Monday afternoon. The camera showed them sitting together again. Not touching. But the level of intimacy was unmistakable. Lila was crying softly. Mark handed her a mug, my chipped mug, actually, the one with the blue rim. She said, I can't keep lying to her. He replied, just hold on. It's complicated. That line was the crack in the wall. That was all I needed. I paused the video before it played. I didn't need to show it. They could see in my eyes that I already had. Lila covered her face. Please don't show that to everyone. I won't, I said. Not if you're honest with me right now. She looked up, eyes red. About what? How long has this been going on? Emotionally. Lila looked at Mark. He looked at the floor. That told me everything. 8 months, she whispered. I didn't react. I stayed perfectly still until she whispered again, louder this time. 8 months. Mark tried to correct her. It wasn't. Don't, she said. Not now. Not after everything. He shut his mouth. For a moment, they were two people sitting in the consequences of their own choices. And no amount of excuses could soften it. A knock interrupted us. Emily stepped inside, holding a thin folder. You asked me to bring this if things escalated. I took it from her. Thank you. Mark frowned. What is that? A contract, I said. And a lease. He stiffened. Because he knew exactly which lease this was. The one he had forgotten I co-signed. The one with the clause he never read carefully. The one I'd quietly highlighted 2 nights ago. A clause that would matter more than anything else before this story ended. But I didn't open it yet. Instead, I stood, letting the brass key brush the back of my hand. We're going back out there, I said. Because you two started this publicly. And you're going to finish it publicly? Mark asked. No, I replied. I'm going to finish it correctly. And the difference between those 2 words was about to change everything. When we stepped back into the hall, the atmosphere had shifted from shock to a kind of suspended anticipation. People weren't whispering anymore, they were waiting. Waiting for the next thread to unravel, waiting to see how far the truth stretched, waiting to see what I would do. The brass key on my bracelet brushed my wrist again, as if reminding me that I wasn't walking into chaos, I was walking into a plan. Mark followed behind me, shoulders tense, jaw locked. Lila trailed several steps farther back, silver dress dulled under the lights. They looked less like 2 people in love and more like 2 people about to face a verdict they hadn't prepared for. I walked straight to the center of the room, right where the toast had been interrupted. The projector screen behind us still showed the paused Nanny cam frame, timestamp 4:17 p.m., today, frozen in place like an indictment. "Thank you all for your patience," I said softly. "No mic. I didn't need one." The room had gone quiet enough that even a whisper would have carried. "I'm sure you're wondering what's happening. And you deserve clarity." Someone near the bar murmured, "Good for her," under their breath. Mark stepped forward. "This is private." "You made it public," I said, not turning toward him. "Both of you." A few guests nodded, tiny, instinctive gestures of alignment. It wasn't loyalty. It was simple recognition. Actions have consequences. A server approached hesitantly. "Should I keep serving?" "Yes," I said. "Everyone should continue enjoying themselves." Because this wasn't about dramatics. It was about truth. Calm, measured, undeniable truth. I placed the thin folder, lease, contract, documents, on the table beside me. Not open. Not displayed. Just present. A visible signal that the story wasn't over. "Earlier tonight," I said, "my best friend made a confession. And while I appreciate honesty, the timing was interesting." Lila's breath hitched audibly. She shared her feelings for my husband. Feelings she's had for years, apparently. Gasps, head shakes, tight exhalations. But no outright shock anymore. The room had already recalibrated its loyalties. And the footage, I continued, showed that today wasn't the first intimate moment between them. Mark took a step toward me. "Nothing happened. I need everyone to understand that." "That's the third time you've said nothing happened," I replied. "You're clinging to technicalities because they're the only ground you think you have left." The words hit like a clean, controlled strike. He swallowed. Hard. Lila tried to intervene. "I didn't mean to hurt anyone. I couldn't keep lying." "And yet," I said, "you lied to me for 8 months." Her shoulders sagged. A microscene unfolded to my right, my mother-in-law wiping her eyes, whispering, "I always liked her," to someone beside her. I didn't know if she meant me or Lila. It didn't matter. Tonight wasn't about pleasing in-laws. Tonight was about boundaries. I took a breath, grounding myself, then lifted the folder. "I'd like to explain one more thing," I said. "Something that ties all of this together." The room leaned in. "You've all heard me mention the house Mark and I moved into last year," I began. "A lot of you came to the housewarming. You know it was fast, unexpected, and expensive." Mark closed his eyes. Because he knew what was coming. "The house," I continued, "isn't owned by us jointly. It's owned by me." A ripple. "And it's rented out to us, on paper." Because when Mark insisted I handle the paperwork during the remodel, he didn't realize that the property management agreement uses my name as both owner and co-lessor. Lila's eyes widened. "What does that mean?" "It means," I said, "that when Mark signed the last lease renewal and left the third signature line blank, he left the occupancy rights entirely in my hands." I let that sink in. Mark stepped forward again, voice cracking. "You're not kicking me out." "I haven't said that," I replied. "I haven't said anything about consequences yet." "But that's what this is, isn't it?" he demanded. "You're setting me up to be humiliated." "You humiliated yourself," I said, calm as glass. "I'm just laying out the facts." He opened his mouth again, but I lifted a hand. "Let me finish." I opened the lease to the page with the clause I had highlighted 2 nights ago. Several guests leaned forward, trying to see. "This clause," I said, "states that if one tenant violates the residency conditions, including breach of trust that affects household stability, the co-lessor has full authority to remove them from the premises." Mark stared at the document as if it were a gun pointed at him. "You're twisting that language," he whispered. "I'm using the language exactly as it's written," I replied. "And you signed it without reading it." A few guests exhaled sharply, more shock, more recognition. But I wasn't finished. However, I said, closing the folder neatly, I'm not going to force any decision tonight. Because unlike the two of you, I don't act impulsively based on emotion. The sentence struck harder than shouting ever could. I want space, I continued. Tonight, I looked at Mark, will stay with your brother. I'll stay in the house. He opened his mouth, but no words came out. And I turned to Lila, will leave the party now. Quietly. Without another word to me or my husband. Lila's face crumpled. Please. I'm not punishing you, I said. I'm protecting myself. There's a difference. She backed away, tears streaming, and a few guests stepped aside to let her pass. No one comforted her. Not one person. As she reached the door, she looked back at Mark. He didn't move toward her. He didn't even blink. And that was when I realized something important: betrayal looks different when the lights are on. When witnesses exist. When consequences sit in plain sight. Mark wasn't protecting her anymore. He was protecting himself. And I would use that instinct later. A microscene emerged. Emily slipped me a small envelope. You want this on you, she whispered. Inside was a printed still frame from one of the videos. Not for the crowd. For the later confrontation. I slid it into my clutch. Then I addressed the room once more. Thank you, I said. Everyone can return to enjoying the evening. I'm done speaking. The DJ restarted the music, quietly, respectfully. People shifted, unsure how to act, but gradually the party's rhythm returned. Mark approached me slowly. You blindsided me. No, I said. I illuminated you. He stared at the paused nanny cam footage on the screen. I never thought you'd do something like this, he whispered. In that instant, I understood that, I replied. You assumed my silence meant ignorance. It didn't. The brass key tapped my wrist again. This wasn't revenge. Not yet. This was alignment. And the real collapse, the one built on timestamps, boundaries, and proof, was still coming. The last guests lingered well past midnight, uncertain whether to hug me, avoid me, or quietly gather their coats and escape the storm they'd just witnessed. I thanked each of them politely, steady, controlled, showing none of the rage or hurt they probably expected to see. Rage is noisy. Clarity is quiet. And tonight, clarity was the only thing I trusted. When the final couple left, the Oak Ridge Garden Hall fell into a hush broken only by the soft whir of the projector cooling down. The nanny cam frame, timestamp 4:17 p.m., still glowed faintly on the screen. Mark stood in front of it as if mesmerized by his own undoing. He looked hollow, like a man replaying every choice he'd convinced himself wasn't a choice at all. I walked to the gift table, picking up the clutch where I kept the printed still frame Emily had given me. My bracelet shifted as I moved, the brass key brushing my skin like a whisper, steady. Mark turned. You really want me gone tonight? I want space, I replied. Space is not exile. It's clarity. He raked a hand through his hair. Clarity? Is that what this is? Punishing me in front of everyone? You punished yourself when you entertained someone else's affection in our home, I said quietly. You just thought it wouldn't matter. A distant sound broke through, the soft click of the venue manager locking the far doors. It signaled that we were the last ones. That the night had narrowed down to the two of us and the truth. We should go, Mark said. Separately, I replied. He flinched, but nodded. As he walked toward the exit, I noticed his hesitation near the coat rack. He turned back. You said we'd talk later. When? Tomorrow, I said. At home. He swallowed. My home too. For now, I said. The words landed like a stone. But he didn't argue. He grabbed his coat and left, the door shutting behind him with a muted thud. I stood alone under the dimmed lights, my breath slow, the hall heavy with the echo of choices. A microscene, the technician approached, careful steps. Do you want the video files exported? I can send everything to your phone or your email. I looked at him for a long moment. He was young, maybe 22, earnest in a way most people aren't anymore. Email them, I said. He nodded. All of them? Yes, I replied. All of them. Because I knew something Mark didn't: truth doesn't require theatrics. It only requires documentation. As I stepped outside, the cool night air hit my face like a reset button. The parking lot was nearly empty. Only Emily's car waited by the curb, headlights on. She lowered the window. Get in. I slipped into the passenger seat and exhaled for the first time in hours. Well, she said, that was historic. I laughed softly. I didn't plan it like that. You didn't plan her confession, maybe, Emily said. But everything else? That was surgical. She wasn't wrong. But I didn't feel triumphant. I felt aware of how fragile peace can be when built on assumptions rather than truth. As she pulled out of the lot, she asked, "How far are you taking this?" "Far enough," I said. "But I'm not looking to destroy him. I'm looking to realign him." Emily smirked. "He's going to crumble tomorrow." "No," I said. "He's going to confront himself tomorrow." We drove in silence for a few minutes, streetlights drifting across the windshield. The town was quiet, storefronts dark, sidewalks empty, the world unaware of the unraveling happening in a single suburban marriage. Then my phone buzzed. Carla, the nanny, sent the weekly compilation. "There's one from Monday you should check. Talk tomorrow if needed." Monday. A day Mark had told me he was doing inventory at the office. My pulse stayed steady. I had already learned how not to react until evidence was fully formed. At home, Emily walked me inside before leaving, making sure I wasn't alone. When she hugged me, she held on an extra second. "You're stronger than this mess," she whispered. "I know," I said. "I just wish strength didn't always require proof." After she left, the house felt colder, larger, like a place waiting for someone to redefine it. I set the brass key bracelet on my nightstand and opened my laptop. The email from the technician was already there. Nanny Cam Archive, complete. I clicked the newest file. Timestamp, Monday, 6:42 p.m. Mark sat on the sofa, head in hands. Lila sat beside him, closer than comfort but not crossing the line they both wanted to pretend didn't exist. Their conversation was quiet, muffled, but the words were unmistakable. "Lila, if you're not happy, you should tell her." "Mark, it's not that simple." "Lila, then why do you stay?" "Mark, because she trusts me." That last line landed harder than any confession tonight. Not because he admitted anything to her, but because he hadn't admitted anything to me. I closed the laptop gently. Trust had been the currency of our marriage. And he'd spent it carelessly. Another microscene, my phone buzzed again. This time it was from an unknown number. "This is Claudia from Oak Ridge HOA. We received your inquiry about the residency clause. Please confirm if you still need the printed affidavit for tomorrow." Yes. That was the other seed I had planted. The residency clause. The one Mark had assumed was symbolic rather than enforceable. The one that required the co-lessor, me, to verify household stability each renewal cycle. The one Lila had unwittingly jeopardized simply by being a repeated presence in our home during work hours. And the HOA, naturally cautious, always supported documentation. I replied. Yes. Print it. I'll sign tomorrow. I wasn't evicting him. Not yet. But I was formalizing boundaries. And boundaries, once formalized, become fact. I went to bed late, sleep uneasy, body still replaying the shattering quiet of the anniversary party, not the noises, but the silences between them. By morning, sunlight had filled the kitchen as if pretending nothing happened. The chipped mug sat on the counter, the same one from the video. I ran my thumb over its rim. A small imperfection. A flaw that didn't ruin it, but reminded me it had history. I put it away. At exactly 9 a.m., Mark walked in. Not with the defiance he left with. With dread. He didn't sit. Didn't remove his coat. He just said, "I saw the emails. The HOA. The clauses. Are you seriously doing this?" I set a copy of the affidavit on the table. He stared at it. "You're going to sign that?" "Yes." "Why?" he whispered. "Because last night wasn't the betrayal," I said softly. "The betrayal was the 8 months before. The footage just ended the debate." He closed his eyes. "And I want you to understand something," I added. "I'm not ending our marriage today. I'm setting the first boundary we've had in years." He opened his eyes. "What boundary?" he asked. "That your choices," I said, "finally have consequences." He looked at the affidavit again. "This will go on record," he said. "Yes," I replied. "Records hold people accountable." The brass key tapped my wrist. I wasn't finished. And the biggest reveal, the one neither of them knew existed, was still waiting inside a folder on my laptop titled CAM number 2, Nursery. Mark stared at me as if the affidavit were a cliff edge and he'd only just realized he was standing on the wrong side of it. The kitchen was silent except for the faint hum of the refrigerator. Morning light pressed against the blinds, casting thin stripes across the table, the same table where we'd once planned vacations, birthdays, futures. Now it held only a pen, a document, and the weight of choices he never expected me to confront. He finally spoke. "What's in the second folder?" His voice cracked on the last word. I didn't answer immediately. I lifted the brass key on my bracelet, letting it swing once before resting it against my palm. The key had become my anchor, small, steady, honest. Everything he had not been for 8 months. "There's something I need to show you," I said. "But before I do, I need you to understand that I didn't seek any of this out. I didn't look for reasons to distrust you. The reasons arrived on their own." He swallowed hard. "What folder?" I walked to my laptop on the kitchen counter and opened it. The screen lit up with a row of neatly labeled Nanny Cam folders. He recognized the icons immediately and paled. I clicked the one labeled CAM number 2, Nursery. Mark stepped back. "Why would there be footage from there?" "There's no need. You installed the cameras during the remodel," I said. "Every room except the bathroom. You insisted." His face drained, memory hitting him like cold water. I opened the newest clip. Timestamp, last Thursday, 5:12 p.m. The audio came through clearly. The nanny had been tidying toys in the corner. Mark and Lila stood near the rocking chair, close, angled toward each other in a way two innocent people don't stand. This clip was different from the others. Not intimate the way affairs are shown in movies. Intimate the way emotional affairs always are. Quiet. Intentional. Unmistakably personal. "Lila, you said you'd talk to her soon." "Mark, I will. After the anniversary. I just need the right moment." "Lila, she doesn't have to get hurt." "Mark, I don't want to lose her respect." "Lila, you won't. If you're honest." "Mark, I need her to understand I didn't mean for this to happen." He never said he loved Lila. Never said he wanted to leave me. He said something worse. He said he wanted to break my heart carefully. As if planning the cleanest possible wound made the betrayal noble. The clip ended. I closed the laptop gently and looked at him. He looked sick. He choked on the words. "I didn't even know the camera caught that. I didn't think." "You didn't think I'd ever see it," I said. "Because you assumed I trusted you too much to look." He ran both hands through his hair. It wasn't supposed to go that far. I never meant to let it get that far. But you did. Silence settled into the room again, thick, relentless, honest. Mark collapsed into the chair across from me. He didn't cry. He didn't rage. He just stared at the table like a man realizing he'd set fire to his own house. "I'll move out today," he said hoarsely. "If that's what you want." "No," I replied. He looked up sharply. "I don't want you to run," I said. "Running is what people do when they're protecting their pride. I want you accountable. Not gone. Not forgiven. Accountable." He didn't understand yet. But he would. I placed the affidavit between us and slid a second document across the table, a printed copy of our household stability agreement from the HOA renewal packet. "This," I said, tapping the document, "is what I'm submitting today. It doesn't remove you from the home. It doesn't initiate eviction. It formalizes something you've avoided for 8 months." He scanned it with trembling eyes. "Household status, conditional. Reason, emotional breach and loss of trust. Condition for continued residency, mandated counseling, weekly disclosure, no unsupervised visitors during work hours until review." Mark looked up. "You're putting me on probation?" "I'm putting this house on protected footing," I said. "And putting you on factual footing." He let out a breath that sounded like defeat and relief wrapped together. "I don't deserve this chance." "Maybe not," I said. "But I deserve clarity. And stability. And proof that you understand the gravity of what you allowed." He nodded slowly, like a man absorbing terms of surrender he knew he'd negotiated himself into. A microscene, my phone buzzed on the counter. A message from Claudia at the HOA. "Affidavit ready for signature. Office open until 3 p.m. Then another from the venue technician. "Files archived. Let me know if you need copies for legal reasons." And finally one from Carla, the nanny. "Whatever you decide, I'm with you." I powered off the phone. "I'll sign the affidavit today," I told Mark. "It doesn't end our marriage. But it logs what happened. It makes this real. Documented. And it gives both of us structure." He nodded again, quieter this time. What do you want from me now?" "Honesty," I said. "Every day. No more carefully planned half-truths. No emotional outsourcing. No secret corridors in this marriage." He closed his eyes. "I can do that." "We'll see," I replied. "Accountability is not a promise. It's a habit." He swallowed. "What about Lila?" "That's your consequence," I said. "You'll explain to her why you're cutting ties. And you'll do it without blaming me, or the cameras, or the circumstances. You'll take ownership." He nodded slowly, tears finally breaking his composure. I stood. "I'm going to sign the affidavit." As I walked to the door, the brass key on my bracelet swung once more, light, sure, certain. Right before stepping outside, I turned back. "One more thing," I said. "This only works if you understand something deeply." He wiped his face, waiting. "You didn't lose me last night," I said. "You lost the version of me who assumed you'd never lie." He absorbed that like it was a verdict. Then I left, closing the door behind me with a soft click, quieter than truth, louder than forgiveness. Because forgiveness wasn't on the table. Not yet. But boundaries were. And boundaries, once written, become law.